May now invite all the speakers and panelists to the stage. Mr. Willy Lin, Deputy Chairman of the Federation of Hong Kong Industries. Pehin Dato Seng, Second Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Brunei. Dr. Djatmiko, Bris, Witjaksono, Director for Asean Cooperation, Ministry of Trade of Indonesia. His Excellency Mustapa, Mohamed, Minister of International Trade and Industry of Malaysia. Mr. Gregory, Domingo, Secretary, Department of Trade and Industry of the Philippines. Ms. Sulaimah, Mahmood, Director, ASEAN Division, Ministry of Trade and Industry of Singapore to proceed to the stage. And may I now invite Dr. Lim Hong Hin, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN, to deliver his speech. Dr. Lim, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Your Excellency, Secretary Gregory, Honorable ASEAN Economic Ministers, distinguished delegates. Just give me a minute while the putting on the presentation. Yes, thank you very much. What I hope to do for the next 10 to 15 minutes is to give you a very broad view as to where ASEAN is at the moment, and also to share with you some of the latest development in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of establishing ASEAN Economic Community. And we'll have a quick overview of the economic relation between ASEAN and Hong Kong, and also the opportunity, as most of you are businessmen, and look at what we can actually offer to you, notwithstanding the ASEAN-Hong Kong FTA, which is going to be negotiated early 2014. ASEAN performance has remained resilient due to the strong domestic factor. Economic recovery is becoming very broad-based. Thank you. Very broad-based and private sector-driven, affecting the impact of the weakening of external environment as the output grow. And our economy grew by an average of 5.7% this year, and our merchandise trade, as you can see from the screen, is about 2.7 trillion US dollars, and also our FDI inflow is about $108.2 billion. Our forecast for this year will be lowered to 4.9%, and this is due to the larger export market, moderate investment in three of our biggest economies, which is Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. And the growth is expected to pick up next year to 5.4%. This is as investment recovers, as the export benefit from the improved global trade, and also the recent currency depreciation in some of the ASEAN member states. As you can see from this slide, since the inception of ASEAN way back in 1967, ASEAN has been working quite hard to transform itself into a stable, prosperous, and highly competitive region with equitable economic development. As you can see from the timeline, one of the critical timelines to point your focus to is in 1992. That's when the ASEAN leaders at the 4th ASEAN Summit in Singapore have actually signed the framework agreement on enhancing ASEAN economic cooperation. It was this framework agreement that gives start to a proliferation of economic initiative in terms of how we can move to create a more stable and prosperous region. In that very same summit, we have witnessed the creation of AFTA, and we also have the Services Agreement in 1995, and then in 1998 we have the ASEAN Investment Agreement. And what's more important, in 2003, we have the Bali Concord II, where the leaders have actually committed to establish an ASEAN community by 2020. 4 years later, in 2007, this is where the ASEAN leaders have endorsed the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint and have agreed to expedite the timeline from 2020 to 2015. And more importantly, in 2 weeks ago, when we were at the ASEAN 23rd ASEAN Summit in Brunei, the leaders have also started to endorse the declaration on ASEAN Community post-2015. So the leaders are already thinking ahead while waiting for the ASEAN community to be in place by 2015. We have to start thinking for the whole region as to what we'll do post-2015. ASEAN Economic Community, this is the realization of an end goal of economic integration as empowered in the Vision 2020, and is based on the convergence of interests of ASEAN member states to deepen and broaden the economic integration through existing and also new economic initiatives. In establishing the AEC, ASEAN will act in accordance with the principle of open, outward-looking, inclusive and market-driven economies consistent with the multilateral rule. Overall, the ASEAN Economic Community, AEC, and we stage 4 key characteristics, as you can see in the slide. Pillar 1, a single market and production base. Pillar 2, a highly competitive economic region. Pillar 3, equitable economic development. And Pillar 4, quite critical, is to fully integrate with the global economies. What I hope to do in the next few slides is to give you an idea of what the progress we've achieved over the past, what we call 5 years after launching of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint. And in the area of trade in goods, as you can see, I just highlight only a few initiatives which is deemed to be quite important for the businessman when it comes to promote free flows goods in the region. One is the elimination of tariff barrier. As you already know, for the ASEAN 6, we have already eliminated all their duties since 1 January 2010. It's over 99%, except for some tariff line in the general exception list. Whereas for our Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam countries, CLV in short, the tariff already been reduced to 0 to 5%, and this will be eliminated by 2015 with some flexibility of 7% by 2018. As far as the non-tariff barrier is concerned, we already have a work program in place, and this is a work program we try to work towards eliminating NTBs to facilitate the free flow of goods in the country, in the region. And some of the work program include updating the NTM database, also having dialogue with private sectors, especially on the priority integration sectors, which is the automotive, electronics, and also textile and apparel. And we also have we're going through a pilot project at the moment where each country nominates a case to be resolved with a view to ensure there is a transparency in how we actually remove NTB in the region. As far as the self-certification pilot project is concerned, this is an effort undertaken by ASEAN with a view to reduce administrative costs and burden associated with navigating through the complicated rules of origin and also the procedures in place when we're utilizing the FTA. I'm pleased to inform you that at this point in time, we already have 2 pilot projects participated by ASEAN countries in place. When it comes to customs, we also have what we call a strategic plan of customs development from 2011 to 2015. It varies, goes from tariff classification and all the way down to knowledge-based services, which is meant to support timely consumer-focused process, and also to services that minimize administrative burden and on legitimate trade. And we also have the ASEAN single window. So basically we have 15 areas in where we're going to integrate and harmonize custom in ASEAN and also the ASEAN single window itself. In standard conformance, we have 3 key areas. One is to have a single regulatory regime framework agreement for the priority integration sectors. Here, I can be pleased to inform you that we already have put in place such a single regulatory regime for cosmetic, electronic and electrical equipment, traditional medicine and health supplement. And what's the work in progress is for medical devices. As far as the harmonization of standard, as I mentioned earlier on, we are focusing on the priority integration sector, which include automotive, cosmetic, electrical electronic equipment, medical devices, prepared foodstuff, rubber-based product, wood-based product. And I'm happy to share with you that 20 priority product standards have been harmonized. 71 safety standards have been harmonized together with 10 electromagnetic compatibility standards. And also we've updated 130 international safety standards to date. On the last part, where we talk about the MRA for recognition and acceptance of cumulative assessment result, again here, pleased to share with you, we already put in place the MRA for electrical electronic equipment as well as pharmaceutical. And with the work in progress we have is automotive, agro-based product, and also prepared food stuff. So the work is going on as far as that is concerned to ensure that they don't become a hinder to the free flow of goods in ASEAN. On financial integration, as you can see, we also have 3 key elements stipulated in the AEC blueprint. One is the financial service liberalization, and this has been undertaken based on a positive list approach. And the committee are working very hard to try to finalize the 6th package of commitment by end of this year for signing by the finance minister next April 2014. With regard to the capital account liberalizations, these efforts have been done to undertake the identified rules for trying to promote freer flow of capital, which does not restrict only to FDI. It also apply to portfolio flow, as well as other type of flow like trade credit, loans, currency deposit, other assets, and also liability. as far as the third element is concerned, the capital market development, this is to facilitate cross-border collaboration between various markets in ASEAN. Last year, we've actually set up a trading link with 3 of our major equity markets, and which is now connected via a single trading platform with a combined market capitalization of $1.4 trillion coming from more than 2,300 companies. So this is what we are currently doing as far as financial integration is concerned. In the area of services, as you can see from the milestone, we have our first agreement signed back in 1995, and since then, we've already concluded 8 package of commitments, and then we're now working on the 9th package for the signing by next year, 2014. And we also have started to look into trying to enhance the what we call the AFAS, the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services. In doing so, what we intend to do is to build upon what we've done in ASEAN, and also what we've done with the dialogue partners. And more importantly, is to Article 5 of GATS, which call for substantial sectoral coverage, and also to eliminate substantially all what we call limitation and discrimination. And the other area on services, we also have an ASEAN mutual recognition arrangement to facilitate movement of skilled labor in the region. And here we have 7 MRA in place. It covers accountancy, architecture, dental practitioner, engineers, medical practitioner, nursing, and also surveyor. And more important, last year in Cambodia in November 2012, the ASEAN Economic Minister also signed the ASEAN Agreement on Movement of Natural Person. This goes beyond covering the skill level in trade and services. It also covers trade in goods as well as investment. On investment, Deputy Minister Yan Yong this morning have gone to a certain extent to describe what we're doing in investment. I'll give you a very quick overview. ACIA, the ASEAN Comprehensive Investment Agreement, entered into force in March 2012, and it broadened and deepened 2 early agreements with the aim to create a more liberal, facilitative, and transparent and competitive investment environment in ASEAN by providing for investment liberalization, facilitation, promotion, as well as protection, and also by benefiting the investors and their investment based in ASEAN, and also by preserving or not backtracking on what they have been undertaken in the earlier agreement. It covers 5 sectors and services incidental to these sectors, which include manufacturing, agriculture, fishery, forestry, and mining and quarrying. In the area of transport, we do have 3 modes of transports. If you look at A, ASEAN is working very hard to have an open sky agreement, and this will provide a more competitive space for greater expansion and opportunity for air travel in terms of more destination, increased capacity, and lower fare. Through the provision of international air services with full third, fourth freedom right of traffic result within ASEAN. Under the land initiative, there are also many initiatives under this mode of transport. What I've shown here is the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Goods in Transit. This is to facilitate the movement of goods within the region. We are in the process of finalizing 2 more protocols before this framework agreement comes into place. The Protocol 7 with regard to the custom transit system will be finalized and signed within this year. And then we're hoping to also finalize Protocol 2, which is the destination of frontier ports, hopefully by next year. And also under the land, we also have the what we call the ASEAN Highway Network. This actually connects 23 designated routes within ASEAN country, which covers a length of 38,400 kilometers with a view to facilitate the flow of goods within ASEAN. And we also have the Singapore-Kunming Railway Link. This covers from Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and China. And we also have the spur line going to Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos as well. Under the sea, we have what we call the ASEAN Ro-Ro Shipping Network. It's quite important to link the mainland and the archipelago region, especially in Indonesia and the Philippines, for seamless intermodal transport in ASEAN. A master plan and a feasibility study on the establishing Ro-Ro network have been completed. The senior official working at the recommendation, and there were 3 priority routes that's been identified as a result of this master plan feasibility study. The 3 are Dumai in Indonesia to Malacca, Malaysia, and also Palawan to Penang to Phuket, and also finally General Santos from the Philippines to Bitung in Indonesia. If we want to look at the ASEAN-Hong Kong-China economic relation, I know that you've been hearing a lot of numbers from this morning session, and I do not wish to confuse you further because it all depends on the source of data. And we always have an issue of trying to align it to what is the actual data being traded between the two regions. From our side, if you look at 2002, there's about total trade of $30.6 billion, and then going up to $94.9 billion. This gives you an average annual growth rate of 19.3% for the past 10 years. That's how vibrant the trade between ASEAN and Hong Kong. If you look at closer the ASEAN-Hong Kong-China trade, I'm sure you're quite interested to look at who are the major traders, importers and exporters between ASEAN and Hong Kong. When we look at the importers, is from Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia. The products they're importing from Hong Kong are electric machinery, reactor and boilers, and so on, purse and stones. And when we talk about exporting from ASEAN to Hong Kong, the top 3 exporters are Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia again. Electric machinery, reactor, boilers, and mineral fuel. So these are the major trade that's going on at the moment between ASEAN and Hong Kong, China. If we look at the FDI inflow coming from Hong Kong to China, as you can see from 2004, we're looking at only $0.3 billion. And when we look at 2012, it's about $5.1 billion. If you look at the past 8 years, the average annual growth rate you're looking at is about 33%, and it's still growing. I'm sure there's a lot of interest about ASEAN-Hong Kong-China FTA. It was back in October 2011 when Hong Kong-China requested to accede to the ASEAN-China FTA. Since then, there have been a lot of deliberation at the senior official level, at the minister level, and then earlier this year, the ASEAN leader had agreed to endorse for an ASEAN-Hong Kong FTA. And 3 months later on, we had our first senior official meeting between ASEAN and Hong Kong, China. And then there was more to have a preliminary exchange of view in terms of how we're going to undertake this negotiation. And then what was agreed was that we'll start early 2014 to start the negotiation for ASEAN-Hong Kong FTA. What was also being discussed was that to look at the possibility to conclude this as soon as possible. And given that we have also quite a number of FTA on the table, one of the idea that we floated was that to do this within 2 years' time. Opportunity arising from AEC. As I mentioned earlier on, we've taken a lot of economic initiative over the years in order to work towards creating a stable, prosperous, and highly competitive region. And then ARTIGA is, sorry for all this acronym. Once you deal with ASEAN, you have to deal with economy, and we love economy. And for the ARTIGA, is the ASEAN Trade and Goods Agreement. AFAS, as I pointed out earlier on, is the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, and AKIA, ASEAN Comprehensive Investment Agreement. And I do not wish to repeat all this, but I want to only highlight that even under ARTIGA, we have done a lot of work on tariff and non-tariff barrier elimination. We also have looked into creation of rules of origin, appropriate rules of origin to ensure that the FTA that's been created are being utilized. And then we also have looked into the trade facilitation measure like custom and standard, which I went through earlier on. Under AFAS, as mentioned, the 8th package of commitment already been concluded, and it covers all the sectors under the WTO classification 120, and it's also WTO plus commitment. Under AKIA, we do protect all the assets owned by and controlled by the investors. This will go beyond mover, immover, shares, stock, bond, debenture, IP to patent, trademarks, and also trade secret, profit sharing agreement, and even concession. So we cover everything that's owned by the investors. And we're going to be more transparent and consistent and a more predictable investment rule. And we also have a provision, what we call for the investor-state dispute settlement. There are 3 options here. One is the alternative dispute resolution, where you can go through mediation, conciliation, consultation, and negotiation, or you can even bring it to the domestic court tribunal, or you can even bring it to the international for arbitration. So there are options here for investors to feel that their investors are being safeguarded in whichever country they invest in ASEAN. The other opportunity arising from AEC, as I mentioned earlier on, under the financial integration, we're going to have a more liberalized insurance and banking subsector as a result of the package of commitment that's been concluded. And we're going to have a more developed and integrated debt equity market, which is to allow cross-border investment within the region. Under aviation, there are currently 17 direct flights from major cities in ASEAN to Hong Kong, except Laos. And then there's a weekly seat capacity of 204,653. I don't know, most of you will be aware of this. Last year in 2012, the EU Council on Tourism have actually voted Laos as the most favorite destination for 2012. So it even gives you more opportunity why you should visit Laos, especially for Jonathan who never been there. And then we also have a work in progress, the ASEAN Business Travel Card, to make sure it's easier for businessmen residing in ASEAN to move around the region to conduct their business. In terms of tourism, 89 million visitors a year. Out of that, only 1.1 come from Hong Kong, and there's still a lot of opportunity to tap on. But also for tourism, which most of you might not know, 33 sites in 7 ASEAN member states are under the UNESCO World Heritage List. This is how many sites we have in ASEAN. And we also got our own ASEAN Heritage List. And we're also working towards easing of visa requirement to make it easier for people to come to the region. Opportunity from arising from AAC. This is where it is to try to encourage businessmen in Hong Kong to look at ASEAN not only to go for the domestic market of over 670 million, but more as a gateway to a bigger market access. Because as you know, we already concluded 5 FTA with bilateral with member countries like China, Japan, Korea, India, Australia, New Zealand, as mentioned by Secretary Gregory this morning. And then what I have on the slide is to give you a very quick overview in terms of when the agreement entered into force, the market size, the economic size, and so the total trade. So for example, ASEAN-China FTA, this is the first FTA ASEAN have entered with any third country. And this is enforced in 2005. Market size is 1.97 billion. And economic size is 10.6 trillion, and the total trade at the moment is 319 billion. As you also recall this morning, I believe from Fred Lam, we were talking about the trade figures in terms of our target is to hit 500 billion by 2015. Even the leaders in Brunei 2 weeks ago was talking about setting a 1 trillion target by 2020. So this is how big the potentials are between ASEAN and China and Hong Kong. And one thing which I did not put here is also the RCP mentioned by Secretary Gregory where we are actually now negotiating with all existing FTA partners with a view to conclude negotiation by 2015. And that FTA, when it comes into fruition, it will cover half the world population and accounted for 1/3 of the world GDP. And as far as RCP is concerned, it will have adopted the inclusive approach in the sense that once we concluded with our existing FTA partners, it will be open to the rest of the world who are interested to come in on board. Thank you very much, and I end my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Lim, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. This is a great pleasure and my honor to be invited here to moderate this session. And we are very delighted to have the 5 ASEAN Trade and Industry Ministers joining us. And thank you, Dr. Lim, for enlightening us with the roadmap of the regional economic integration of ASEAN. And I'm sure we have much to ponder on the inside views. I think that due to timing, I just want to make it very simple that, as Jonathan mentioned in the earlier sessions, his companies have been investing in a lot of ASEAN countries, and this is on the business point of view. And as a people communication point of view, I would say my family is a typical byproduct of ASEAN and Hong Kong. My mom is actually born in Singapore, and my wife are Thai, and my kids are born in Bangkok. So it's a very typical of business and people combining together as a perfect combination of the typical Hong Kong families. So I'd like to just highlight a couple of points. As our secretary mentioned earlier, by 2012, ASEAN was Hong Kong's second largest trading partner after mainland China. And we are also an important entrepot for trade between mainland and ASEAN. Against this background, we warmly welcome the imminent realization of ASEAN Economic Community AEC, in which our 5 ministers will be talking about a little bit later. Just make it short, traditional economies are desperately looking for new economic growth drivers. The high growth and prosperity of the past few decades depended largely on government spending and private consumption. Without corresponding creation of wealth, the substantial government spending and private consumption will only lead to huge sovereign and private debts. The key for sustainable growth is deregulation, I think we all agree, cooperation and integration. The future is strengthening and enlargement of regional and cross-regional cooperation. Multilateral, bilateral agreements would be a logical and practical approach, and we really look at the AEC with great insight. Besides, it's important to take a positive attitude and focus on what can be worked out together first. To impose too much requirements and drastic changes on the part of partners will only cause mistrust and stalemate. Hong Kong, as we all mentioned today, and you, President Mr. So mentioned, will be keen to be a partner of Asean. There are a lot of potential for Hong Kong to function as a facilitator and mediator. Listen, we listen very well. Hong Kong has its unique role and function. Almost except Hong Kong is the most open city within China, a gateway to China, and it has for centuries very tight relationships with all Asean member stations. We are an integral part of Asia and a reliable partner in service, logistics, and manufacturing sectors. Now, without further ado, let's say, I would like to invite 5 Asian trade and industry directors and ministries joining us this session, and I'm sure they will have plenty to share with us the opportunities emerging from the AEC, the huge potential of this thriving Asian market. I'm sure we will have a very fruitful result from our very candid exchange and discussions. Thank you very much. So I would now like to invite Mr. Pehin from Brunei to say a few words on AEC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Willy. I think there is very little I can add on the ASEAN Economic Community. I think our Deputy Secretary has actually done a very comprehensive job of explaining to all of you. But I'd like to stray a bit, with your permission, taking just 2 or 3 minutes, because I just saw your blurb, by your tourism people about Green Hong Kong. And there are 2 things I want to highlight here. One is, particularly, we have been working together, Indonesia and Malaysia and Brunei, on what we call the Heart of Borneo. This is a project where we actually addressing the question of climate change, the question of, how to prevent, and how, and for Brunei alone, 58% of our land area is protected. And this is our contribution in a way to the bigger picture of climate change and how we address it. And I think linked to your Green Hong Kong, the idea, and this is something which is, I would like just to point out. My last point really is, there are things that we are working, and as chairman of ASEAN, recently we had the East Asia Summit and also the APEC Summit in Bali. One of the projects which I think your people should know here is the question of energy conservation, how do you conserve energy, how do you use energy in the sense for the people. One of the ideas that we've been working with Indonesia, the United States and Brunei was the question of rural electrification in our part of the world. And the whole idea here really is how to put in rural electrification. And with this idea was how to lift the poverty from about 100 million people in our region. And this is a public and private sector ideas, and how we can bring everybody in. And in one shot, if we can lift these people from the poverty line, we would have, contributed so much in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of our contribution to our people. So I thought these are the 2 points I just want to make.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very conservation. I think is now a global initiative now. Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. So I just would like to start my remark with inviting the Hong Kong business people to look into the ASEAN as your basis for your expansion in your business. Through the AEC, I think in many ways Hong Kong can contribute as well as can significantly play important roles. As you have heard from the Deputy Secretary Generals, on the fourth pillar we have under the AEC, single market and production base, competitive region, and equitable economic development, as well as the integration with the global economy. Basically, all the details under those four pillars is very much related with the Hong Kong experience and existence. If I may to provide one example, is the infrastructure development, which is grown on the second pillars as competitive region. Even though all 10 ASEAN members, we don't have a common policy, we don't have a similar technical rules and regulation, but we have a common platform towards more integrated economy within ASEAN 10 members of the economy. We try to achieve by 2015, as mentioned by the 3SG. And I also would like to express that if I may to refer the latest study released by the Asia Development Bank. By 2015, the century will be on our hands. I mean the Asian, which is ASEAN is part of the Asia. The study, I believe, more than 50% of this world prosperity will be in this region, including the ASEAN. If in the case of Indonesia, last year we have marked $1.3 trillion, and if we extrapolate, I think it's not only Indonesia, all of ASEAN, we have a very good economic outlook, and we do believe by the next few decades, we are going to be the majors and the center of the economic activity within the regions. So I just would like to add to what Minister Pehin said. In ASEAN, we are not only dealing with the four pillars under the AEC. We have another agenda in terms of energy security, food security, as well as in the disaster management. So a lot of initiative has been initialized, has been endorsed by the leaders. I think beyond those very good opportunity as well as initiative, a lot of things actually can be grasped by the business people. So we always mention to our constituents domestically. I think it's not only for the case of Indonesia, it's also for other 9 other ASEAN member states. We try to convince our people, write the challenge, size the benefit, the opportunity, and prepare and enhance the capacity in order to utilize the lower hanging fruit or even the potential benefit from the ASEAN, the greater integration of economic within ASEAN.
Thank you very much. We have a minister from Malaysia.
Thank you, Willy. In the interest of time, I would like to organize my presentation along 5 themes. The first is that physically ASEAN is in 2 parts. In economic terms, we are in 3 parts. Physically, we are mainland ASEAN and the other part of ASEAN. Mainland will be those our colleagues who were on stage earlier than us. And we are our northern neighbors in the southern part here. but Malaysia has recognized that. We link. We are both. Mainland Malaysia is both part of the mainland ASEAN and also the other part of ASEAN. So we see ourselves as a mediator. And the problems within ASEAN, we are the go-between. Yeah? So the two parts of ASEAN. But more importantly, in economic terms, the three parts of ASEAN. We are very diverse. The rich part of ASEAN, Brunei, Singapore. Those in the middle, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and those who are, not as developed as the other three. So we are diverse, and for that reason, there are opportunities in every country. Those of you from Hong Kong who are interested in the more developed service sector will go to Singapore. Those of you who are looking for wages which are much lower than China will probably go to Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. And those who are looking for something in between, you come to Malaysia, which is where I come from. So we're very diverse. That's point number one. ASEAN is diverse. So there's a piece of the action for everyone here in this room. Secondly, we are already partners. Yeah? We have Willy from Singapore, married to Thai. Yeah? And we have thousands of Singaporeans in Hong Kong, thousands of Malaysians here in Hong Kong, culturally similar, speaking the same language. So we are already partners. Therefore, what we need to look at now is how can the FTA between ASEAN and Hong Kong help catapult this very important relationship to a much higher level. So we are looking forward to this FTA between ASEAN and Hong Kong. We are already partners. The issue is how do we enhance this very important relationship, which has been there for many, many years, hundreds of years. So that's point number two. Point number three would be Hong Kong has got strengths in many areas. Seamless, logistics are very strong. Entrepot, you're very strong. When you talk about logistics, seamless connectivity, cost, very efficient. Hong Kong is a very efficient port. So we've been collaborating. Many of us have been collaborating with Hong Kong. And in the area of corruption, for example, Malaysia and Hong Kong, there's very close collaboration between the Malaysian and Hong Kong authorities in the area of corruption. So there are many things we can learn from each other, and hopefully Hong Kong can also learn from us. So this is another dimension I would like to share with you. It's not just the economic, the social, the poverty that was mentioned earlier by Willy Lin and a few others. Yeah? So, and economic freedom index, as you say, Hong Kong has done very well. It's always been scoring high marks when it comes to economic freedom. So these are areas where we should be able to learn more from Hong Kong. Finally, we've been talking about China, about Japan. Before this, 20 years ago, it was Japan. Now it's about China. And by 2015 and 2020, in my view, ASEAN will be a very important economic region in Asia. 20 years ago, it was only about Japan and no China. Now it's China. I bet you 2020, ASEAN is going to be a force to be reckoned with. So come aboard, come to Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well said. Can I have Philippines?
Thank you, Willy. Well, Asia is the fastest growing and will continue to be the fastest growing part of the world for many decades to come. And thus, it makes a lot of sense for us really to be integrated into a single production base and integrated also in the provision of services, which requires as well relaxation of investment rules across the region. And if we do so, that will be beneficial to everybody. But of course, as we've learned in the past, what each state has to do is really to calibrate their liberalization to what their industries can handle. Because liberalizing too fast, as we experienced in the Philippines in the late 90s and early 2000s, creates some big dislocations. So you'd like to liberalize at a pace that is aggressive enough, but still at a pace that the industries can have time to adapt to. And I think those are very practical considerations that we have to consider when we do trade policy. Of course, our objective is really to have complementary and reinforcing liberalization. And that's happening now actually. In AEC 2015, for example, just as it was explained earlier by SecGen, that there are three components to this, which is liberalization in terms of trade in goods, trade in services, and investments. The trade in goods, for example, in ASEAN, the Big Bang already occurred actually January 1, 2010. That's when over 99% of the tariff lines within ASEAN have been reduced to zero. So today, if you trade among ASEAN neighbors, with some exceptions of CMMV, which are at the lead schedule, then over 99% of the goods are already at zero tariff. The challenge in the trade in goods is really more on the non-tariff barriers and in other forms of trade facilitation measures. On the trade and services that we're working on, the target is 128 sectors by 2015. Over 90 of those have already been liberalized as of today. So we're working on the rest, the balance of that. And in the investment rules, that's still a bigger challenge, so that's continuing to be worked on. The other point I want to make is in the quest for liberalization, the government side only takes half or maybe less than half the burden. We try to set the rules, but really it is the private sector, the businesses, that will make this happen. And part of the responsibility of the government is to make sure that the businesses are aware of the changing regulations so that the businesses have the opportunity to take advantage of the liberalization within ASEAN nations. In the Philippines, we conduct actually hundreds of seminars every year to very large groups of business people. We call it doing business in free trade areas. And we've been doing this for the last 2.5 years. And we've seen an increase in the utilization of FTAs as a result of this. So I would encourage, actually, all the participants of free trade agreements to make similar efforts. And finally, my last observation is on SMEs. Because most of the rules so far, crafted by the free trade agreements, have been biased towards big companies. And so we need to craft new rules and regulations that will apply more to SMEs, in that we need to have more simplified procedures. Right now, very few SMEs avail of the free trade agreements because of the very cumbersome procedures, which is okay with big companies because they have all the lawyers and accountants to kind of do the paperwork. But when you're a small entrepreneur trying to export, let's say, from Philippines to Indonesia or to Malaysia or to Thailand, you don't really want to be filling up 50 pages of forms just to be able to export $10,000 worth of merchandise. And so we've been pushing this agenda in ASEAN, in APEC, and WTO. And well, I'm happy to say that SMEs now are getting more to the forefront of the mindset of the trade policy makers. But we need to implement these measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's very exciting to hear that. And now finally, Singapore, please.
Thank you. I know I'm the last one standing to lunch. I think most of the points that have been made by Excellency Ministers, I would like to echo them. Just to give you a few points. One is basically, I will not be able to touch on all the agreements and the benefits that the private sector will be able to enjoy as a result of the AEC. I think the Deputy SecGen have given a very good overview. And what I'd like to say here is that I think the question we ask is how can the private sector benefit from it? Clearly, I think one of the assured way is that because of all the agreements that ASEAN have signed within ourselves, the ASEAN 10, the internal agreements and all the ASEAN +1 FTAs, the next step is for each of us to basically align all our domestic regulations to this regional agreements. And I think the domestic reforms that all of us, including Singapore, are undertaking or have undertaken, I think that will be the greatest impact for the private sector, because all leads to basically liberalization of trade, facilitation of trade in both services, goods and investment. And here I think since earlier on we said that 93% of the services trade, of Hong Kong GDP accounts for services, just to flag here, in terms of the services agreement, AFAS, which Minister Domingo have cited too, one of the key threshold that was basically for ASEAN to increase the equity threshold for investors. And we're moving up to 70%. I think that's one of the targets. And I think that would be really good news to the private sector. And again, when we improved and enhanced our investment agreement among ourselves, we've actually now included a category called an ASEAN-based investor. Basically, if you register in one of the ASEAN member states and you invest in another, you will be treated as one. So I think these are the two things I'd just like to highlight today. And the next key point I thought also to raise that we believe that we should not be static. 2015 is just 2 years down the road. We've done and accomplished almost 85% of what we promised to do, and we're working towards the remainder. But important thing I'd like to also share here is that at the recent summit in Brunei, I think the leaders recognize that in order to stay competitive, ASEAN needs to work and remain and do more things. And that is why the leaders have declared that we need to kickstart the work on post-2015. What are the other things that ASEAN needs to do, not just in goods, services and investment, but other areas. Maybe things like customs facilitation, deepened cooperation, improved connectivity. So there are other new areas, and there will be a task force that's formed to look into this. And I think feedback from the private sector is most useful. And my last comment is basically I'd like also to share that we are looking forward to negotiating the ASEAN-Hong Kong FTA. And I think here, as in all our other FTAs, Singapore would like to welcome all the feedback and the inputs and suggestions from the private sector, because at the end of the day, whatever agreements that we do is for the benefit of the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think in the view of time, probably we don't have the time really to do another round. But I'd just like to recap that I think earlier you met somebody who said it's beauty contest. I don't think it's beauty contest at all. I think we have 3 stages very well said by our Malaysian conference that was a little bit more developing, and so we also looking for the very really lower labor cost. But very important is green manufacturing is definitely in everybody's mind. We cannot develop a place without consideration of the environment. And I'm very happy to hear that the base economy in which anybody can invest, that have already looked at ASEAN countries and actually the whole. Thank you very much, and then I'm sorry we bring one a bit of our time that we cannot do more than that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lin and all the panelists. This also marks the end of the symposium today. May I now invite the ministers, senior government officials and moderators to depart for the next meeting first. Would all other guests please remain seated.